All right. Again, I'm Dave. I'm an alcoholic. Um, Hopefully tonight, when I'm done talking, I will describe in some way, shape, or form how I came into this program and stopped drinking one day at a time and found a higher power to help me with that. Um, you know, qualify myself. I got to go before I started drinking. I got to tell you a little bit about who I am and what made me click, and then why, what happened when I drank, and then eventually why I quit. So I grew up not far from here, Bowers Beach, Delaware, little tiny town. Most of the guys down there, they worked hard. They either worked on fishing boats or on the water in some way, shape, or form. They worked hard. They played hard. That's what I grew up watching. I grew up watching them in the bars. That's what my family did down there anyway. They worked, they drank, they paid their bills, they took care of the finances at home, but they spent most of their times at the bars fighting and having what I thought was a good time because, you hear them talk, they're laughing, they're telling these stories, they're having a great time, right? So anyway, my dad moved away when I was fairly young, and we ended up living with my grandparents, and I had uncles that were living in that house too. And they were a lot younger than my mother. They were closer to my age. They were closer to brothers than they were uncles. So I was pretty spoiled. I'll be honest with you. I was pretty spoiled. I got my way a lot, and I had a lot of attention. And from what I can remember, I really was a pretty decent kid. You know what I mean? I was a pretty good kid. I may have been a little bit spoiled rotten or whatever, but I was generally a good kid, up until I was, to a certain age anyway. But, my mom didn't stay there forever, and she didn't stay at her parents' forever, and she didn't stay single forever either. She ended up meeting somebody from the Air Force Base, and he was from Maine, and they ended up getting married, and we moved up there. Right from the get-go, him and we did not get along. I was 8. I was closer to 10 by the time I lived with them. I had, pretty much been spoiled. And he was not going to allow that, not in his house. And anyway, the things between him and I, right from the get-go, did not go well. And by the time I was 13, which was just a couple years later, the streets were a better option for me. The streets of Maine was a better option for me than staying in the home that I was in. So that's what I did. I left the house. I ran away from home. There was no runaway law in the state of Maine at the time. The cops did pick me up and bring me back one time. And I said, this is pointless because I'm just going to leave. There's no sense in you bringing me back here. They're like, well, we got to this time anyway. And I knew the cops. I went to school with their kids. Freeport, Maine was like Bowers back in the day. Freeport, Maine was a little one-horse town. The town cops were from the town. I went to school with their kids, and I'm like, Terry, I'm not staying here. And he knew why. It wasn't a secret. He knew what was going on at that house, but they didn't do nothing back then. So anyway, I left. I ended up leaving. I hit the streets. And for the most part, though, I was a fairly naive child. At this point in time, I was still a pretty naive child. I had no idea what I was getting ready to get myself into in them streets. And it was tough at the beginning, and I got beat up quite a bit, and I got personal belongings stolen. It was a rough go at it. But I was already drinking and doing drugs, so, burying it, right? But anyway, so there comes a time when you're out there that you either join one clique or the other, right? I mean, you either continue to get your butt whooped and stuff taken from you, or you join this crowd and you start fighting back and you start becoming one of those bullies, one of those people that are doing that. Well, I chose I was already angry enough, so I chose to start fighting back, and I chose to join the other side. So by the time I was 18 years old, which there was no shelters for teenagers in the state of Maine at that time. My goal in life was I couldn't wait till I hit 18 years old. I want to be 18 so I can live in the shelter so I have a bed to sleep in. I stopped having to couch surf and try to find places to sleep, try to get out of the cold. This was my goal in life, and it happened. I turned 18 and I got into that into that homeless shelter, and I wasn't there for very long. And it was in the early 90s, 1990 as a matter of fact. they were just starting to bring counselors and people into these homeless shelter for the men and trying to get them on the right path, trying to get them cleaned up, get jobs. So they got a hold of my buddy. His name was David Grant. I can say his name now. He just passed recently. They got a hold of him. He was the guy that bought all of our alcohol for us too, man. How mean was that, right? But they got a hold of him and they tricked him, is what I like to say. They tricked him to go into rehab. And he came back from rehab and he was trying to tell me how I was drinking to bury my feelings and all this other stuff. And I'm like, dude, you just need to shut up. I was drinking whiskey at the time and it got heated and he didn't shut up and he ended up in the hospital and I ended up in jail. And that was the homeless shelter's way that they got me. That's how they tricked me in. They said if I wanted a bed back in that place when I got out of jail, then I was going to have to go to rehab or I was going to have to be out on the streets. So I said, well, I'm sick of the cold streets, so I'll go to this rehab. So I went to a 28-day rehab in Lewiston, Maine. And I was there for 2 weeks, and I was put in a hot seat in the middle of the room, and some of the other kids, they were on me, man, and I wasn't having it. I picked up a chair and threw it at somebody, missed them. And they put me in this padded room in the hospital while they were figuring out what they were going to do with me, if they were going to call the cops or what they were going to do. And they came back, and they had a proposal. There was a place up in Bangor, Maine called Project Rebound. It was a 6-month program for angry, disturbed, addicted children. And I, of course, rather than go on the streets, I'm like, yeah, I'll take this, So I went there. Now, what I didn't tell you is when I was on the streets, I was becoming very homicidal. I was to the point where I didn't care what I was doing to who and who I was hurting and how I was getting what I was getting and who I had to run through to get what I had to get. And I felt like at this point, I just felt like life had just dealt me a raw deal, and I was mean, and I was angry, and I was a ball of rage all the time, ball of rage, just looking for somebody to piss me off so I could come at them. That's who I was. So I hit this Project Rebound, and 6 months in, intensive counseling every day. I came out of there. At least I came out of that place knowing for the rest of my life whatever I did was my fault and I was responsible for it and nobody else was pulling my strings anymore. I knew that for a fact. I knew I was responsible for my own actions. I also met my first wife in there. She was in there as a patient too. Did I mention that it was a place for violent people? Well, when we got out, we both started drinking again. And when you have two people that drink together and they both get violent when they drink, it was all rainbows and sunshines, as you can imagine. No, it wasn't. It was a brutal relationship. Loved her dearly, still do. Her story is much sadder than mine. I'll get into that in a little while. The ending of hers is anyway. So we obviously fought like cats and dogs, and I got locked up a lot because that's what happens. Anyway, even with all the fighting and everything, by this time I had been removed from the streets. I had gotten a hold of my real father. He and his brothers and my whole family were all union men. They dredged for a living. And he got me into the union. He got me out on the dredge, got me out on the rigs, and I started making money, and life started getting good. I had a house and a car and a couple of kids and a wife, and even though, everything on the outside looked good, right? Everything looks good. I got the American dream, right? I got the dogs, the cats, the kids, the cars, the house, everything. But on the inside of the house, what was going on was insanity, man. It was just not good. It just wasn't good. But when I lost it, when that relationship ended, I didn't know who I was anymore. I lost my identity. Who am I? What am I? I became basically a nomad. I out on these rigs and living wherever we're working and making all this money and blowing it on dry goods and strange women and just off to the races. When I'm telling you I was off to the races, we got divorced when I was 27 years old, and from 27 to 35, I don't remember most of those years. I can't tell you what town I was in, where I lived when, and I mean, it's all a great big blur. It's all a huge blur. I know that I got in trouble a couple of times, and I got sent back. I came to AA, and I got my stuff together. And and this is what I like. This is not what I like to say. It's the truth. Every time I came here, I thought I was going to find some sort of self-awareness that was going to help me be able to drink successfully. I thought I was going to find out some more about me. You know what I mean? Like what made like, it seemed to help at Project Rebound. I came out a little better. So maybe this time, if I work on this issue, when I drink, I won't become a jerk. You know what I mean? And guess what? Every time I drank, I was a jerk. That never worked. But I tried, like the big book says, I tried everything, just drinking beer, just drinking on the weekends, making sure I had a full stomach. I mean, I tried everything. I tell people all the time, if somebody would have told me to stand over there in the corner on my head for 10 minutes, and then when I flip back up, if I drank, I wouldn't become a jerk, I would have tried it. I would have tried it. That's how much alcohol meant to me. That's how much I wanted to be able to drink alcohol. I just wanted to be able to drink. I wanted anything else in this world to be wrong with me other than the alcohol. Please, let me be crazy. Let me need this issue worked out, that issue worked out. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case, and it never will be. The problem with is I have that allergy of alcohol. As soon as I put the first one to my lips, I can't stop. I just can't, and I never will be able to. It has me, and I'm off to the races, and I act the way I act when I drink. There's nothing I can do inside me right now to make me a great person and be able to go out there and stay that great person while I'm drinking alcohol. I've tried. It doesn't work. Not for me, anyway. That's my experience. And I've heard other people in the room say the same thing, so... but anyway, back to life, where my life took me and how I got here. Bouncing in and out of AA those times just to get my stuff together, and I would for a little while, and then back to and it was always the same thing, the same revolving door. Get better for a little while, end up in prison. Get better for a little while, end up in prison. And I have an alcoholic brain that tells me to this day right now, I'm just kidding myself. I'm going to go drink again and be back in prison. I don't know why it still tells me that, but it does. So, fast forward to this last time that I came into the rooms. I told you I was homicidal. I had never been suicidal before in my life. Never. But I'm sitting in prison again, and this was a few years ago. It was right after the prison riots had happened here in Delaware. And I have no idea why I'm there. I'm covered in blood. I couldn't tell you why I'm there. No clue. I'm trying to get to the COs to ask them, why am I here, man? They don't want to talk to you. I was supposed to be in Smyrna, but that place was closed. I was down in Georgetown. They were telling me, we don't even know why you're here. We thought you were going somewhere else. We don't even know why you're in this prison. You weren't even in this district. And I'm like, okay, so why am I here? And it took about a week before I even found out why I was in there. And that's supposed to be, I tried to tell them, I'm supposed to be arraigned within a certain amount of time, blah, 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 blah. And I got mouthy with them. And I had one guy, he put his hands on me pretty good. He slammed me up against the wall. They weren't playing with prisoners at that time. They weren't. It was a scarier time. I had never been scared in prison of a correction officer before. I was scared the whole time I was in this time. But I was suicidal. I'm sitting there, and I'm finally thinking, first of all, I'm in there with this crazy guy, too, right? And he's in there. He's trying to get off on insanity. So I swear to God, all day long, he's walking around going, ticky, 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 ticky. Now, if you know what a prison cell is like, it's small. To hear that 10 hours a day, some guy walking around doing that, and then kicking the bottom of my bunk and everything, and I was just, I thought I was going to go insane. And then I was thinking of all these different ways to kill myself, right? I'm thinking, all the ways that it's not going to be too bad for Tammy when she finds me. My kids, my kids aren't going to be all freaked out here, and I did it this way. And I'm thinking all this. I'm into it. Like, I'm thinking about it. And, of course, the most important part, because we're talking about me here, what's not going to hurt too bad, right? Because it's still me involved. when this voice said, go back to AA. Now, never in my life. I've been ordered in the AA and suggested to go to AA, but this was the first time that ever popped in my head. And I know everybody in here, we have thoughts. We know sometimes we talk to ourselves, right? But we know what that sounds like. We know what our thoughts sound like. This was something outside of me that said, go back to AA. Now, I guess before I tell you this next part, I should tell you I never went to church as a child, ever. Never had anything to do with God. And by the time I was old enough to hear other people's concept, they were pretty much telling me with the things that I had done and the way I was living, I didn't need to worry about this God anyway because I was never going to see him. And from my childhood and everything else, I also figured that if there really was a God, he didn't really care much for me, so I didn't care much for him. It was pretty much a mutual relationship. You don't care for me, pal, I don't care for you either. So when I heard this voice and I'm sitting there contemplating and thinking the only thing this could have been was God. There's nothing else it could have been. Like, it was so creepy and eerie. It was so outside of myself, so not my thought that it was scared me. And then more fear came in, because if you'd have heard the way that I argued with people to prove my point that there was no God, and the things and gestures that I had done, and the strike me deads and all this stuff, man, I was scared. I was like, ooh, did I go too far? How much trouble am I in? Is it too late? You know what I mean? But I thought to myself, I'm going to listen to this voice and I'm going to go. And a lot of it was out of fear, and a lot of it was to come to AA to find somebody spiritual, to find out if it was too late, if I was going to go to hell or not. Seriously. How crazy is that? But this is the truth. It sounds crazy, but it's the truth. That's what got me back into Alcoholics Anonymous this time. Fear of, am I going to hell? So I come in and I come down those stairs right over there, and I got halfway down the stairs and everybody was chuckling and laughing and having a good time, and I froze. I couldn't come down. I was scared. 3 weeks before, I was in jail. 3 weeks before I was in jail, I was down to Bayview in Barrows Beach, Delaware, out in the parking lot in a fist fight with somebody that outweighed me by 100 pounds. But I was scared to walk down them stairs to get help. But I did. I didn't. I went home and got who I was seeing at the time, Tammy, and I made her come back with me. And we came down the stairs together, and then we come over and I sit down. I sit next to Betty, of all people. And she said, and you guys, I got here in time to hear these clowns over here cutting up and kidding around. What's the point? And all this and aha, and everybody's laughing and having a good time. And Betty looks over to me and she goes, yeah, we cut up and kid around in here. I said, yeah, I've been to a couple of meetings. I said, I've been to meetings in Maine before. She goes, Maine? Oh my God, I got family all through Maine, and stick around after the meeting and talk. And so after the meeting we were talking about Maine, and just what are the chances of me sitting next to somebody that I have something in common with right off the bat, It just made it easier. It made the meeting easier. The laughter made the meeting easier too, honestly. That cutting up and kidding around, I still love coming to this group just for that, man. It's the best, man. And my home group even, the one I'm involved in even copies Jeb's ooh and ah and we, with the chips, because we love it. It's great, It's not supposed to be bleak. It's supposed to be fun, right? It's supposed to have a good time here. So I came in and I was shopping around for a sponsor, and there was a guy he was talking spiritual all the time and always talking about God, and I was like, maybe this is the guy I need, you know what I mean? So I started figuring out what meetings he was going to, and I went to every meeting that he went to. I was kind of stalking him in a way, to be honest with you. I was stalking him. And he was going to this gratitude meeting all the time on Monday nights here at the Grange. He's always going to this gratitude meeting, and I hated it. I hated coming to that gratitude meeting on Monday nights, because you guys were talking about how grateful you were for this and grateful you were for that. And one lady spoke up and she said, my daughter got in a car accident, and she said, I am just so grateful that I was sober and I was able to be there for her. And I thought, how mean are you? You know, you grateful your daughter got in an accident? I didn't understand. I honestly did not understand the gratitude part about it, that she was removed from the alcohol so she was able to be there for her daughter. That part my brain didn't catch. My brain didn't catch much of the gratitude that you guys were talking about, to be honest with you. And I spoke up and I told you, told you exactly how much I hated that meeting. I dropped some F-bombs because I used to talk like that a lot. I dropped the F-bombs and everything and told you I hated the meeting and I thought you all were fake. I'd like to say I was brand new when that happened, but that was about 9 months coming in. I was about 9 months in when that happened. That anger took a long time to get rid of. But I kept coming to that gratitude meeting and kept coming to that gratitude meeting. And if you want to hear my gratitude today, you're going to have to stand out in the parking lot with me afterwards because it's too long of a list to list off right here while I speak. It would take me too long. We don't have enough time. So then he says to me, I'm standing out, I'm starting to share my story some, right, during the meetings and tell you guys who I am, I've been in meetings before and blah, 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 and you guys are picking my brain and I'm picking your brain, some of the older guys, and at Saturday mornings, the guys are staying, talking to me in the parking lot for a while and getting to know me, and finally one of them asked me, he says, man, what's different for you this time? I said, oh, I'm into it. He said, you are? I said, yeah, I'm into it. He goes, that's good. What do you mean you're into it? I said, I'm into it. And really what I thought I was going to get was a pat on the back. Way to go. Good job. Yay. What I got was, oh, so you got a sponsor? I said, well, no. Home group? No. So you're not doing any service work for Alcoholics Anonymous or anything? I said, no. He said, you ain't in anything. You're around it like you've always been. And he turned around and walked away. Now, I had visions of punching this guy in the back of the head. I really did. I wanted to hit him. Don't he know who he's talking to? How dare you talk to me like that? A week later, I asked him to be my sponsor. He said yes. I joined this group, and they were looking for a coffee. Actually, Volden was looking to get rid of a Friday night coffee commitment. And I said, well, I would do it, but I don't have enough time. And I think it was actually Misty was the first one that spoke up and said, well, that don't matter. We'll waive that. You can start next week. I said, that wasn't what I was looking for. What I was looking for was to be able to go back to my sponsor and say, well, they were talking about the coffee commitment, and I said I'd do it, but obviously I don't have enough time and get that pat on the back. I was looking for the attaboy, and that's not what happened. Instead, I made coffee Friday nights for 2.5 years here at the Grange after that. And, I used to come down, at the end of it, too, I spoiled little kid that I could be. At the end of it, I was ready to be done, and I threw such a fit about being done, and I just didn't handle it very well because I thought, it's been a long time and I deserve my Friday nights, and it was getting hard to get rid of the key, and I really acted like kind of a butt about it. But right now, I used to come down them stairs Friday night, and Rick Walsh and Flip Flop Dave would be sitting over at that table right there doing a big book study. You know what I would give today? To walk down that steps and see them two over there. They both graduated. They both moved on. They both died sober. But yeah, it'd be great to see them again. So I dove in, and then that started my service work, and then I became a GSR, and then I switched from that over to intergroup, and I still do that. I still am involved in my home group. I still help out. I don't open up all the time anymore, but when it needs to be open, I get calls and things of that nature. I stay very involved in service work. Very involved in service work. Because that's what the people that before me did. At least the people that are in my circle, that's what they do. I try to do what the people in my circle do because they've been sober for a long time. And that's how they stay sober. They stay sober by going to meetings and service work. So, all right. So now I'm in the AA. I'm going around. I'm catching some gratitude finally, because every time I call my sponsor, by the way, I don't know how many people I was going to kill, beat up, or in early recovery, how many phone calls he got, like, I'm going to kill this person, I'm going to beat this person up, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But every time I made one of them phone calls, it was always, dude, why can't you find the gratitude in it? I'm like, what? It took a very long time for me to do that. The gratitude, man, took so long. Okay, where am I at here? No! All right. So I'm rolling along, and a lot of people come into Alcoholics Anonymous, and they're looking to get a family back. They've taken, that happened. My children came back to me fairly quick. They were both, I made amends to them. Both of them didn't want to hear it. They said there was no need, but I knew there was a need. So it was short and sweet and to the point with them. But I was in a relationship, and I was in a long-term relationship when I came in. And, it wasn't very long after I got sober, I didn't want to be in that relationship anymore. And you all didn't know it. And some of you have known me the whole time I've been in, and to see us come around, everybody thought everything was great. Everybody thought she was terrific, which is fine. And everybody, we played it off really well. The reality in the situation is she had a lot over my head, and I just wanted her gone, and I couldn't get her gone. I couldn't get her to leave. I begged her many, many times to leave, and she wouldn't. And she had some stuff over my head, so she was sticking around. And I was getting angrier and angrier and sorer about it. And the only person in this world that knew about it was my sponsor. The only person in this world that knew the truth that was going on was my sponsor. I was so upset about it. There was days I was ready to drive my car into a telephone pole. I just didn't want to be living like this anymore, and I couldn't. There was no way out. I couldn't see any way out. And the funny thing is I came home from work one day, and there was a note on the table, and it said, "I moved back to Maine. Sorry, I love you, but I moved back to Maine." Right? So you would think I'd be like, yeah, throw a party, right? No, of course not. My first thought was, my first thought was, what am I going to do financially? How am I going to get through this? I finally got what I wanted, right? I mean, she left, but that financial fear crept in. And again, how am I going to make it? How am I going to do this? And it threw me for a loop. I almost went and got drunk. My first thought was to go to the bar and get drunk. That was my very first thought. My first thought was, you know what, there's nobody around. There's nobody to hold me accountable anymore. I can go get drunk and nobody would know. And then my second thought was, no, don't do that. Go to the bar, don't get drunk, just pick up a strange woman. And my third thought was call your sponsor. So my first thought and my second thought, I can't control what my first thought is. I can't really control my thoughts. But that third thought, what I can control is what I react on. That third thought is what I did. I called my sponsor. I called my sponsor immediately. We talked. We got together. And, it wasn't, I didn't live in that funk for very long. I wasn't there long. I was out of that really quick. And life, life just rolls on. And my little niece comes down from Maine. We're over at Camden. We're over at the Peach Festival in Camden. I'm going to cut this off right after this story, by the way. We're over at the Peach Festival in Camden. And I guess I'm walking around, I'm cutting up, and I'm kidding around with people. I love to tell this because I'd drink a fifth of whiskey, do some dry goods, snort some stuff, and go around looking for fights. this was who I was. That's who I had become in life. That was what I'd like to do. And when that changed from the streets, it just went right straight to the bars, and it was really the same thing in the bars. It was drinking and looking for fights. That's who I had become, a menace to society. I drank and drove. I looked to fight. I just looked to hurt people like I was hurting. So my little niece is down from Maine. I've been sober for a little while. And we're walking through Camden, and I really couldn't stand people for the longest time at this Peach Festival. And she looks over at me and she says, Uncle, you're such a social butterfly. Yeah. At first, my first thought was to smack her. How dare you talk about me like that? That was my thought. That's how far gone I was. My second thought was, oh my God, I'm changing. What is going on with me? You know what I mean? Like, I'm actually walking around and cutting up and kidding around and having fun with people. I belong in society. I'm a useful member of it. How did this happen? It happened from God in AA is how it happened. You guys did this to me. God did this to me. I've had some unfortunate things happen. I've got to tell you, the biggest gratitude I have, nobody can say anything to shock me. Nobody can. Jimmy, a friend of mine. We came into this program at the same time. We were hanging around the same people. We were talking the same talk. I thought we were on the same spiritual road, and we may have been. I think we were. I let him move into the house. He was renting a space. He chose to drink again. I let him stay. He was paying his bills. He wasn't affecting my family. Actually, at the time, my daughter was living there, and Jimmy and my daughter were two peas in a pod, man. They both had crappy cars. One was broken down. They'd borrow each other's cars. They bummed cigarettes and help each other with cigarettes. I mean, they were just two peas in a pod, man. You know, if I had kicked them out, I'd had to deal with my daughter would be mad at me. But I came home one Friday night, and my dog was scratching and whining at the door. And I'm yelling at Jimmy to let my dog out. What are you, stupid? Go in there, and he's dead. Dead. So he had, I guess I didn't know drugs was a part of his story, and he had gotten some stuff that was laced with some fentanyl, and it killed him. And, you know, I watched Jimmy go from what I thought was on the same spiritual path as me, talking the same talk as me, walking the same walk, hanging out with the same people, doing the same thing I was doing, to drinking and dead within months. That is the biggest lesson, man. It was right there in front of my face. It showed me exactly what could happen to me and how quickly if I decided to drink again. You know how I don't know if I'll ever be able to tell him how grateful I am for that lesson that he gave me. Maybe someday, maybe, you know, I'll see him up there someday and I can say, thank you, man. You don't know what you did for me. Yeah, so then my name's Dave and I'm an alcoholic. Thank you, Dave.
I had nothing to do with it.